Big time fight coming up this weekend for the Ultimate Fighter Season 11 Team Liddell middleweight winner Court the Crusher McGee making his 31st pro appearance, and he's never been submitted. He's taking on Ramiz Brahimaj out of Fortis MMA, who's 9-3, and of those 9 wins, all of them by submission, 8 of them in the first round. Can Ramiz Brahimaj submit Court McGee? That's the question that we're looking to answer. And if you look at it for Ramiz Brahimaj, it's not just the submissions. Go back and watch his fights. This is a guy that when, the ESTD 2018, when I was getting started with Fight Night picks almost 4 years ago, Ramiz was the guy that I was watching because it wasn't just his submission abilities. It was the fact that the guy throws hands and he has absolute power in his hands. He can drop guys, and then once he's got you dropped, you don't have to worry about him. There's some guys like, Jamal Emmerts when he fought Pat Sabatini. I've got him rocked. He's on the ground. I better dive in. Ramiz is one of those guys that when you're rocked, he dives in and he absolutely finishes guy. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Trains with guys like Cesar Ferreira, Carlos Diego Ferreira, and Alex Morono over there at Fortis MMA. And really, the craziest part about that sentence is the fact that Diego Ferreira commutes, 8-9 hours just to go to that gym. So pretty crazy commitment for him there. But when we look at this fight, Ramiz coming out of the bigger gym, you look at it for Court McGee coming out of a smaller gym, he's one of those guys that really hasn't left Utah a whole lot. But man, this guy has had a very, very impressive career in mixed martial arts. And you have to give credit where it's due.
Is he like your friend Brandon when he leaves Nova Scotia? Has to point out that they don't have this when they're in his hometown?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like if you live in New York and you went across the way to New Jersey and you went, geez, we don't have this in New York. We've never seen that before. But if we look at it for Court McGee, the 5-on-in, a win over Alex Garcia 3 years and a month ago. He loses to Diego Lima, loses to Sean Brady, loses to Carlos Condit, beats Claudio Silva. And the craziest part about it for Court McGee is you look at his 3 losses there and you thought maybe Father Time's starting to tap him in the shoulder. He's starting to slow down. And then he fought Claudio Silva and Father Time went, hey, Claudio, you gotta go, pal. It's time to leave the UFC.
That's the problem. Father Time had a dub that night, okay? It just wasn't against Court McGee. That's the problem with Court McGee at this stage of his career. He's not a top-level UFC fighter anymore. I know that. Craig knows that. Everybody watching knows that. But this is really just the litmus test for Ramiz Brahimaj. I'm gonna have some fun at your expense, Craig. This is the fight to figure out if Ramiz Brahimaj is like Dustin Stoltzfus in Craig's mind. Is he that, eye-catching talent? Is he that submission specialist who can go out there, get the knockdowns, and then finish guys with the submissions? Or is he just a false bill of goods and we never really see that version of him in the UFC? Because this is going to be that fight. And this is a very important point that I've been thinking about a lot, and I think it's going to be a big deal. Court McGee no longer has the chin that he used to have. If you hit him now, he will go down. Carlos Condit proved that. Condit doesn't have great power at this stage of his career by any means, but even he was able to put really good shots together on McGee and put him down. So that's going to be the big point for this fight. I think if Court McGee is the one using his offensive wrestling, it's a huge mistake, oddly enough. I think that's only going to tire himself out and make it tougher to defend submissions if he does find himself on the mat later on in the fight. I think it's going to be the complete opposite for Brahimaj. I think if Ramiz is going for a lot of takedowns, it's the worst decision ever. Because if you're trying to take down Court McGee, one of the more difficult things to do in the welterweight division, but you're just going to be burning yourself out and hurting your chances to win the fight later on. Because I think this is going to be one of those weird bizarro fights where McGee can actually have a lot of success early on just with his steady pace, and I could see Brahimaj as the fight goes on getting the reads of McGee, maybe landing a big shot over the top at some point in the second or third round and getting the submission late. Because I know that you brought up the fact about how Brahimaj gets it done a lot in the first round and how Court McGee traditionally is known as more of a decision fighter, but I don't really see it that cut and dry. I actually do see McGee going out there and having some success early. I really do think the second round's where this one gets interesting.
If you look at it for Court McGee, he has 1 performance bonus in 18 UFC fights. It was his debut to win the Ultimate Fighter, which is kind of crazy. 15 of his 18 fights in the UFC have ended by decision. He's very well-rounded. He has not the greatest accuracy with his shots, and that is the most frustrating thing when you watch a Court McGee fight. It's like watching maybe Katlyn Chookagian later on tonight. He pushes forward, he throws a lot, but not a lot lands. But in the minds of maybe the judges, some of the people at home, maybe even the commentary, you might think, geez, well, he's just doing a lot, and there's a lot of forward pressure involved in it. but not a lot of finishes. And the weirdest thing about it for Court McGee, you look at some of those fights. Again, when he fights Sean Brady wasn't able to finish him. When he fought Diego Lima, they struck. And then when you watch the fight against Carlos Condit, myself, along with every MMA fan on Twitter, were tweeting and yelling at their TV, Court, just take him down. But Court McGee decided to strike with Carlos Condit, and then Carlos Condit at certain points decided to wrestle. So now you look at that fight against Claudio Silva, and Claudio did not look good. Like, Claudio was one of my guys, like those dark horses that I talk about. Like, if there was a backside to Mount Rushmore, the guys that used to get me excited and they were on these wild win streaks, Claudio Silva, Leonardo Santos, there's always fighters like that for everybody. Those are some of my guys. But again, Father Time has unfortunately tapped them both on the shoulder and said, you need to leave. So when I look at this fight, again, it really is tricky. Can McGee use the forward pressure? Can he use a lot of volume? Can Brahimaj break that distance and smash through with those good strikes? And is he able to get the submission win? So we look at the odds for this one. Brahimaj open to plus 100. He's still around there. Minus 102 is the average on best fight odds. For Court McGee, open to minus 120, minus 119 or thereabouts. Haven't looked at the Tapology votes. Surprised to us they are to you. Matt, I'm going to set the over-under at 60% Brahimaj.
I think they're going to be over.
You think they're going to be over? Wow. 1,301 total votes, 51% Brahimaj, 62% by decision, 23% by submission. For the 49% that have Court McGee, 80% by decision. Again, Court McGee has had 30 fights in MMA. He's fought a good level of competition. I mean, the only knockout loss that he has in the UFC is to Santiago Ponzinibbio. Out of 18 fights, Ponzinibbio is the only one that knocked him out. Nobody's ever submitted him ever. Ramiz Brahimaj hits hard, submits guys, and puts him out in the first round. Look at what he did against Sasha Palatnikov.
Sasha Palatnikov is not.
It was easy.
Yeah.
So, when I look at this fight, it really is tricky. I have a lot of stock in Brahimaj, but there's a little bit of bias there, especially with, hey, you find this guy early, it's like Piotr Jan. I have other fighters.
But not everyone's Piotr Jan.
But Ramiz Brahimaj, I hold in a little bit too high of regard. So, taking on a guy like Court McGee, I have Brahimaj, but I just have to put that one out there.
If you pick Court McGee in this fight, you're probably someone who gets excited about the buyout market in the NBA. Because if you've been following along for the last 2 years, Court McGee's not the same guy he used to be. I don't know why he's the favorite right now. It makes no sense to me. I understand you're going off of the potential of what he can do, and in his last fight, he fought somebody sort of similar stylistically to Brahimaj, just in the fact that they're both very dangerous on the mat. Of course, Brahimaj hits harder than Silva on the feet, but you get the idea. Similar matchups. If you've been following along, Court McGee's not the type of guy who can go out there, defend takedowns for a consistent 15
Watch it
minutes.
happen.
Watch it happen, but still, you get the idea. Like, if you've been watching, especially the last few years, he's not the same guy he used to be. I just don't think he can go out there and take 15 minutes from an opponent. Now, if Brahimaj gets tired early on in the fight, then of course Court McGee can keep a steady pace later on. But that's less Court McGee going out there and winning the fight than Brahimaj giving the fight up. They're very different things. I think Brahimaj should win this, but if he loses, I'm sorry, Craig, I'm never letting you live it down. But I just don't know what Court McGee, his plan's going to be in this fight. Because on the feet, I think he's at a massive disadvantage. Because, like you said, his accuracy's not great at this stage of his career. He has a hard time just hitting the target. And if he does eat that one big shot, and if he does get dropped, I don't think he's going to have the submission defense, especially while rocked, to be able to fight Brahimaj off. So I think he could get one of those cardio king performances, a classic Alexis Davis at 125 type of a fight, perhaps. But I do like Brahimaj in this.
I mean, if you look at it for Brahimaj, that fight against Max Griffin is not a good example. If you want to go off of that one, I do have Brahimaj in this fight, but the confidence, Court McGee, he's a gamer. He's tricky. He's a tricky veteran. So let us know down below in the comments section who you have in this fight. Both of us right now going with Ramiz Brahimaj to get the win. You're not going to want to miss this fight, and the rest of them, including Calvin Kattar and Giga Chikadze up at the tops. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say.
Let's get into it.